Further limits to free speech are not needed.
But civility requires personal self-control.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you, Mark, and I too would like to welcome you to another edition of this very special program. I don't believe you'll find another one like this anywhere on television or on the internet, for that matter. If you've joined us for the first time today, a special welcome to you. And for those viewers who are faithful every week, we're glad you've come back. Before we get to our topic, I'd like for you to meet our panelists today. We'll begin with the gentleman to my right.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am a canon of the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., and canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington.
I'm Jordan Offsire. I'm a rabbi living in retirement in Palm Springs, California, and continuing to teach and to reflect and be a leader in the community.
I'm Tom Plumley. I'm the senior minister of First Christian Church in downtown Fort Worth, Texas. Our congregation is a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
Bart Beach. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist ordained minister. I've been working with that church for many years. I live a few miles from our world headquarters, where I still continue to serve.
And my name is Othel H. Lakey. I'm a bishop in retirement of the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, and I live in Buford, Georgia.
Hello, my name is Mel Robeck. I'm professor of church history and ecumenics at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California, and I'm ordained with the Assemblies of God.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for being here today, and welcome back for most of you. You've been here for many years, some of you, and it's always good to meet with you, especially today for this particularly important subject. And let's get right to that. In recent years, freedom of speech in the United States has become more limited. Certain types of speech have been defined as constituting hate speech and have been criminalized. Recent events, including the murders of staff members of the Charlie Hebdo satirical magazine in Paris and the subsequent international Je suis Charlie protest, have raised questions once again regarding whether or not some limits should be placed on the freedom of speech. Pope Francis has suggested that speech about religion should have limits, that religion should not be a topic that is open to ridicule or provocation. It has a dignity that must be respected. Others have argued that religion should not be exempt from the same type of criticism and satire that any other institution receives. Let's go back now and ask the panelists these questions. First of all, should boundaries be placed on free speech when the topic is religion? The second question, should the ridicule of all religion be added to the list of things defined as hate speech? And finally, to what extent has the relative anonymity provided by social media contributed to the rise in unconstrained speech? Jordan Offsire, Rabbi Offsire, was one who started our program with an opening statement. Let's go back to you now, and please, if you could tell us a little bit more about your thoughts concerning this matter.
Yes, thank you, I will. I'd like to give a kind of structural background to this question, and it will be amplified, I'm sure, as we continue. There are many other aspects as well, but there are particular ones that I want to deal with, which I think are underlying to this issue and maybe elaborated upon going forward. 3 points. First, there is a limit to free speech when safety and human lives are at stake. Justice Holmes was quite clear. One may not cry fire in a crowded movie theater when there is no fire. Free speech is not an excuse. Where life is in danger, free speech is set aside, and we address ourselves to the saving of life, not endangering it. First point. Second point, There are, as I said, limits. And further, libelous speech is not permitted. We are not permitted to tell conscious lies that are factual about other people, and we can be sued in the doing of that, fortunately. And third, among the underlying principles as far as I'm concerned, one may not incite to violence and use as an excuse that we have freedom of speech. That is not permissible. So what I'm really saying as a kind of summary is, no value is absolute. Leave aside the religious realm, but in the civic realm, and each one of them must be contextualized. We must understand what the circumstances are in order to apply those and each of those principles appropriately.
All right, thank you very much. Let's come back across the table to Reverend Plumley. Glad to have you back, and if you could expand your opening thought for us, please.
Thank you. I appreciate the way Rabbi Aufseyer has laid out his point of view, and I agree, and certainly agree with Justice Holmes too. Way back, it's becoming a long time ago when he said that, and the words are still just as true. I believe that government should allow freedom of speech and freedom of expression, but that the human being and groups of human beings need to exercise self-restraint in the name of civility, in the name of peace, in the name of trying to learn about each other. I think of what can be free speech in some contexts turns out to be bullying. If said in the right places, in the right context, and bullying is much more than a personal thing that little kids do to each other, or teenagers do to each other. It's things that groups of adults do to each other. We bully each other quite frequently. Civil unrest. If something causes civil unrest, if a speech causes civil unrest, I think that is more problematic. The stifling of free speech in the name of the possibility that it would cause civil unrest is much more problematic, because that's something a tyrant can use to squelch any dissent. But also then, I think of many cases in world history where words have been used to oppress people. Officially sponsored words have been used to oppress large groups of people, and those kinds of things we need to take great care with them. I think of Paul's words in the 6th chapter of his first letter to the church in Corinth, when he said, "I have a right to do anything, but not all things are beneficial." He said, I am allowed to do anything, but I must not become a slave to anything. And I think that is appropriate self-control that he's talking about there.
All right, thank you very much. Well, we're off to a good start today. Let's come across the table. Dr. Beach, welcome back to the program, and your thoughts on this subject, please.
Well, I think I agree with everything that's been said. These are words of wisdom. We should not limit this type of words. But of course there are settings in the home, in the church, in school, other places where you limit things because you want to have order and so on. But I think we should be very careful in using government laws and things of that type to try to limit freedom of speech, because we have too many examples in history, even in our own lifetime, of oppressive power being used. So I fully agree. Certainly we should not have too many laws limiting speech and making everything you dislike from the viewpoint of government as hate speech. and saying also, even in church, I think we should be careful what we say about other churches, about our own church. Sometimes we ridicule other people. But of course, the problem of the problems is we have to confess that as church people, we do a lot of things that look rather ridiculous to other people. So they ridicule you when you do that. Well, I think most of these things are a matter of morality and civility and education. And that should be practiced to teach people to use speech wisely.
All right, so far I'm hearing self-governance. That seems to be the theme that Tom has set, and of course Rabbi Ofsire would, I believe, would agree with that. I don't hear anyone saying we should have more laws to prevent freedom of speech. Or perhaps Bishop Lakey, you haven't weighed in yet. Welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you. So good to be here. When I saw this topic, I was hoping we would sort of zero in on the moderator's first question about boundaries on speech when it refers to religion. I was hoping we would discuss really whether or not religion ought to be a subject of ridicule. And I would come down on the, if I might, with all due respect, disagree with His Highness the Pope in suggesting that religion ought to be an off-topic for ridicule and satire. I should think that if the one thing that we ought to be able to do as religious persons is to allow our religion to be subject to the most rigorous type of ridicule, satire, poking fun at, because that's, to me, the test. Too often, we allow our religion to be of such that it cannot be criticized. One of my favorite television personalities is Bill Maher, who's an avowed atheist. And I enjoy it so much when he criticizes religion. And it's not my complaint, but my sense is that most of the time, his critique is on target. And I think that we who are in the realm of religion can benefit from those who are outside our particular faiths, poke fun at us and point out the things that don't make sense. And indeed, there is a lot in it, I know in my religion, that doesn't make a whole lot of good sense at times. And these things need to be pointed out to us. So I think free speech ought to be free. But again, I agree with Tom Plumley that, but then we have to be a little circumspect and govern ourselves accordingly. When is it out of bounds in terms of the sensitivities of those whom we're criticizing?
All right, thank you very much. Let's go across the table from you is Dr. Robeck. Mel, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. I agree with virtually everything that's been said at the table so far. As I have thought about this, I was really touched by all of the demonstrations around Je suis Charlie. And my problem with it was not so much that they were demonstrating against this kind of activity, obviously the murders of people who had done this satire, but the idea that in many cases when I heard them speaking, it was kind of like, don't you dare tell us what we can and cannot say. In other words, there's a certain amount of arrogance that sometimes goes with this freedom of speech. You know, we have the right to say anything we want to whomever we want in any way. And it turns out that within the French society, which is all for 300 years, has had a very difficult time with religion as such in a variety of ways, has picked on Islam at this particular point. I think they were trying to defend these people who were making fun of Islam. Now, there may be places where Islam can be criticized and perhaps should be criticized, just as there are places within the Christian church that ought to be criticized as well. But I do think that in many respects, we are in the process of losing any accountability for what we say. And I think social media has contributed significantly to this idea, where you can say just about anything you want, and there are no personal repercussions. You stand and face somebody one-on-one, and you say the kinds of things that are being said in social media, you're going to get in trouble pretty fast. You're going to have to defend yourself. And I fear that if we place more laws, we restricting what can be criticized and what cannot be criticized or satirized or anything else, that we run the big risk of losing all of our freedom to speak in the way that we want to or need to. And I think it's desperately necessary in some cases. The book of James carries this wonderful verse, I think, or two verses. With the tongue we praise our Lord God, and with it we curse those who have been made in God's likeness. Brethren, this should not be so. And I think we have to think seriously, at least I do as a Christian, about how this should be done. In an open society, free speech must be guaranteed. We are an open society. We need to guarantee that. But we also need to learn that freedom involves disputes, it involves refutation, it involves debate, and we have to make our case.
All right, thank you. So far, we have agreement around the table. That's a good thing, from where I'm sitting at least. Let's come, though. We haven't heard from Canon Peterson. Welcome back to the program, John, and your thoughts on the subject,
Tell all
please.
of us we're wrong now.
Yeah, no.
Not quite. But I would like to say to Otho, I don't think I'd be so hard on the Pope. And the reason I would not be so hard on the Pope is because the Pope's concern here is provocation. And when people will provocate against someone or to try to provoke someone else, and that seems to me to be not a helpful way of being able to have a discussion or a dialogue or to come to a better understanding. And so I would find some sympathetic chords, at least, with what the Pope is saying. And particularly today, when we have such a huge amount of Islamophobia in this country, and certainly you saw that in France as well. Gerard Brad, who became the new editor following the assassination of Charlie Hebdo, said there is no such thing in relationship to freedom of speech with a but. You cannot say, I believe in freedom of speech, but. And he argued that there is absolutely no but in the issues of freedom of speech. And it seems to me that, and I think that there's agreement around this table, that there is a but, that there is certainly necessary to have a but. But also at the same time, I would want to argue in relationship to the respect for the other. That person who is different than I am, the other. And at that point, the issue might not be freedom of speech, but it might simply be the dignity of every human being. And so I think that we are, and I think I'm really agreeing with you on many of the points that you made, Rabbi, in relationship to this whole.
Well, let's come across the table, Rabbi. Did you want to respond to that?
Yes, I would. Well, it isn't so much a direct response, but rather another dimension of this that occurs to me, and it's a conceptual piece that I'd like to put briefly on the table, and it is the following. Please, gentlemen, remember that freedom without restraint is anarchy, and freedom of speech without some kinds of restraints responding to aspects that are beyond the relevance of freedom of speech in a particular situation are relevant as well. Freedom without constraint is anarchy, and I would argue that it is the same with freedom of speech, with the guardians, with the fences that we have put up already.
All right, across the table, Tom Plumley, you wanted to respond.
I'm thinking of the book I read not long ago called, titled Hitler's Willing Executioners, and it traced the centuries-long groundwork that was laid by hate speech that led up to the dehumanization of Jews in Europe to such a degree that the Nazis were able actually to pull off what they did in the 30s and 40s.
Because the groundwork had been set.
Because people had been bad-mouthed for so long. Now, I guess where I want to come down is stupid has a right to be heard. Okay? Stupid has a right to be heard, but stupid needs to be called out for the stupid that it is. And that's the important thing, too. With the other side, there has to be freedom for the other side to say, no, you're dumb. That's a dumb idea.
Next to you is Bishop Lakey. We just have a few seconds left here, by the way.
One thing we haven't said is all these things have willing hearers. Hitler wouldn't have gotten where he got to had there not been some folk wanting to hear the hate speech he was spreading. So where is that audience that picks up on these hate speeches, these things that are so bad and all? Some folk are listening, some folk are responding, and some folk like to hear what's being said.
All right, thank you. Jordan, 15 seconds. You look like you had something quick to say.
Well, what I wanted to say was that we have to step back again in all of this and realize that virtually all principles that we have, leave aside religious ones, have constraints of considering them in balance with other sorts of things that need to be taken into consideration.
All right, gentlemen.
As in freedom without constraints, I repeat, is anarchy.
That's all the time we have for this segment. Thank you. So far, so good. We will be back in just a few moments. Mark has an important announcement to make.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you, Mark, and welcome back to the program. We're glad you've joined us today, and I'm sure you have found this discussion quite interesting and enlightening. We're going to hear now our summary statements, but before we do that, I would also encourage you to go to the website and see past programs there. We have a wonderful archived set of programs that I'm sure you'll find interesting. And thank you for your support and all the letters that you write, the notes. We do appreciate them. And for those of you who support financially this program, a special thanks to you. Now let's go to our summary statements, and for that we begin with John Peterson.
Thank you. I believe that there is also another basic human right that we've not discussed today, besides the right of freedom of speech and freedom of faith, religion, and that is the right for every human being to be able to live in his or her own belief system, the right actually to be able to live. And what we experienced in Paris was not the right to be able to live. What we see today in this country is a rise of Islamophobia as well as anti-Semitism. In many Middle Eastern countries today, we see a steep increase in anti-Christian attacks that is going on. And one only has to look at India or Pakistan, Iraq, Syria, or Nigeria to see that this is certainly on the rise. The right to be able to live.
All right, thank you. Reverend Plumley, your summary.
Thank you. Bishop Blakey, after I spoke of stupid having a right to be heard, Bishop Blakey expanded that to say, yes, and stupid has an audience. And I think that's right. I think that's right. And we had an incident in the spring in Texas where the government was going to do military exercises, and some people stood up and said, "Oh, the government's going to come in and take over Texas," as if we're not a part of the United States anyway. And the governor of our state actually gave into that and put an arm of the Texas government to watch over the federal troops. You know, there is an audience for insanity.
All right, thank you. On that note, we go to Bishop Blakey. Your summary, please.
I don't know why it's all turned to me when he said there's an audience for insanity, but we'll leave that for another discussion. Though I agree with the rabbi that we need constraints. The perennial question is, who determines and who enforces whatever those constraints are on freedom of speech? And we must be very, very careful in deciding who will determine what our constraints are.
And
All right, thank you. Across the table, thank you very much, Bishop Blake. Across the table, Dr. Robeck, your summary.
I think it's important to state that all speech, all ridicule, all satire carries consequences. It may not come to you immediately. It may affect the person that is being addressed. My problem with thinking about legislation, further legislation limiting speech, is once you put the government in charge of taking away this kind of speech or that kind of speech, where does it end? And I really have to say we have to take personal responsibility if we want to maintain the freedom of speech that we have in this land.
Thank you. Next to you, Dr. Beach.
Well, I agree with just about everything. I think we've had really a meeting of wisdom here, and I support that. Freedom of speech is so basic to life. Without freedom of speech, there's no life really. But it has to be self-controlled, and there has to be education. People have to understand they have the right to criticize, but also be honest and truthful and not hurtful.
All right, thank you. And now, Rabbi Ofsire, your summation, please.
Thank you. Since I'm the last, I want to summarize the summarizing, if I may, and go back to where we began. I think we would agree that further legal limits on speech are not needed, but a reflecting about the nature of all speech, that is indeed essential. As Tom Plumley reminded us, the Nazis destroyed and killed and massacred, and they used their hate speech to set the table for what they were later to do. Hate speech should not be permitted, but then again, we have to be reflective about all speech, respecting it and recognizing alternatives.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Great discussion. And here we are practicing free speech. Isn't that a wonderful thing? And I know you appreciate it too, as you have been viewing and watching today. If you've tuned in via television or watching us on the internet, we're glad that you've joined us today, and we do look forward to meeting with you again. And we do appreciate your suggestions for programs. For those of you who write to the program, I read those letters, and I have actually gotten some great ideas about topics that we have discussed here on the program. So please, let us know what you'd like to hear us talk about. We'll be happy to accommodate you to the best of our ability. Now, the Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. So now, friends, until next week, at the same time and over this very same channel or on the internet, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.